All right, talking some bowl games, some playoffs, and the aftermath of the college football playoff selection committee. Jimmy Ott, Paul Stone here within the College Sports Rush YouTube channel, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Paul, let's get to the big one at the end. The big rivalry standalone game. It's Army Navy. Army Navy. And Navy is a 6-point favorite in 39. First of all, that catches your attention because spread is pretty high for this game. We know about the motivation and does not have to be questioned in this matchup. You got to love how these two teams bring it. We had a long under streak for quite some time, but those lines adjusted and got all the way down to like the high 20s. Now it's back up to 39. So explosive offenses for these two teams in this one. This is one of the highest totals we've seen in quite some times. Interesting start for the Middies. 7-0. 7-0. Now we don't count a non FCS, I'm sorry, FBS opponent in there. So, but 0-6 against the spread. And I was doing my talk show, and I was like, man, it's been a disappointing season for the Middies this so far this season. My co-host says they're undefeated. I was like, not against the spread. So I mean, 7-0 start. 0-6 against the spread. Navy is a 6-point favorite. That just seems really, really high in this matchup, Paul.
Yeah, when they face non-service academies, first of all, Army and Navy, when they face these teams that are not themselves or Air Force, many of those opposing defenses have, varying degrees of difficulty defending the unique option offense. They only see it once a year, maybe only see it once in a blue moon or so. So it's unfamiliar. There's a lot of motion, a lot of eye candy. It's assignment based. You got to read your keys and all those things. Defenders have to, stay disciplined. So they are, they are have difficulty defending a team like Army or Navy. But when these teams face one another, it's obviously a little bit different. They see this offense or a variation of the option offense every day in practice. They're very familiar with it. Certainly, there's some unique twists that each of these two teams put on their option offense, but the core principles, pretty much remain the same. Navy quarterback Blake Harvath, what can you say about him? He surpassed 1,000 yards rushing this year for the second straight year, entering the regular season finale this weekend against Army. Harvath, 1,040 yards rushing, averages 6 yards per carry. He's passed for another 1,390 yards, 10.6 yards per attempt. So having another big time year. On the other sideline, you have Army quarterback Kel Helms. He hasn't been quite as productive as Harvath, but he's certainly been solid. The 5'10", 205-pound junior. Helms, he's rushed for 1,078 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. And he has been a workhorse, absolute workhorse down the stretch. In Army's last 5 games, he has averaged 31 carries. So much like his predecessor, Bryson Daly, he is carrying the load. Army last year, looking at this game, this time last year, they looked like the superior team on paper, and they were favored by 6.5 points. So pretty much the same spread that we have here, but they were upset by the Middies 31-13. This year, the tables have kind of turned. Navy looks like the superior team. They're favored by 6 at Bet Rivers. The underdog in this series, 10-4 against the spread the last 14. I'll take the points. Give me Army plus the points over Navy this Saturday in Baltimore.
I'm going to piggyback you and jump on the points as well, and take the Army Cadets plus the points here. And like you said, you make a good point, because assignment-based football, and when you force a team in the middle of the season to have 5 or 6 days to prepare to stopping the triple option, it can be confusing to a lot of teams. But yeah, the yards will be hard, so it lends itself to low-scoring games. They're running the balls, the clock is running a lot, so I'm going to take those points. It's a big number in this series. Bet Rivers players who place the same game parlay of at least $10 on NFL or NCAA football games will receive an entry into the weekly Squares game. Winning Squares can earn up to a $50 bonus bet per entry. See the Bet Rivers app or website for more details. Let's go to the first bowl of the season, and that's going to be on Saturday. And what prime time? Washington out of the Big Ten, 8-4 on the season. The 8.5 and 51.5 over the Mountain West Conference champions. And we had that one last week. The Broncos minus the points at home in the Mountain West Conference Championship against UNLV. No problem covering in that one. Strength of schedule to the Big Ten, Washington Huskies versus motivation to the Broncos of Boise State. Paul, um, is Washington going to be motivated for this one? Did some of the teams do us a little bit of our own homework and see who's opting out and whose roster is going to be mostly intact? By teams like, well, Notre Dame, we know there, but Iowa State and Kansas State, who had winning records, who were on their way to participating in bowls. And they sense, of course, Iowa State lost their quarterback. Kansas State, both of them disappointing seasons this year. Maybe they had their bowl game when they went to Dublin, Ireland to start the season back in week 0. But maybe doing a little bit of our homework here and letting us know that they sense that they're not going to have strong participation for the Bulls. Now, there have been some others with 5-7 records who had dipped down to, like Baylor and some others, but those rosters knew that they were not going to have a winning record. They were not going to did not expect an invitation to a bowl game, and a lot of those players in the portal on their way doing their own thing already. So that was a little bit late notice as well. But here you go, Washington and Boise State, Paul. It's a tough one because I would think that Washington would be the superior team here, but boy, these underdogs in these early bowls have been proven to be really profitable because the motivation that usually the underdog is more motivated.
Yeah, Boise would certainly appear to be the more motivated team in this matchup, as you pointed out. The opportunity to knock off the Big Ten team certainly would be a feather in the cap of the Broncos. They were pretty well, though, non-competitive in their two previous games against what I feel like clearly the two best opponents on their schedule this year. Of course, they went to South Florida, lost that opener by 27 to the Bulls, and then later in the year traveled to South Bend, got defeated by the Irish by 21. So pretty non-competitive in these types of games to this point. They did get a bit of good news, a large piece of good news actually, this past week before they defeated UNLV 38-21 as their starting quarterback, Maddox Madsen, returned from injury. He had essentially lost missed the previous 4 games. So it was a big get for the Broncos to have Madsen back under center. He played well against UNLV in the victory, threw for 289 yards and 3 touchdowns, also rushed for a 10-yard touchdown. So played a role in 4 TDs for Boise. You look at this game, and again, it comes down to motivation so often in these bowl games. I actually made Washington a 9-point favorite here. I don't really have any opinion. If I'm going to, one of those guys who's going to play a bowl game just to have some skin in the game, so to speak, I would probably take the underdog. This is a matter of habit and principle, but I'll probably be on the sidelines for this one.
Log into You Bet Rivers account each Saturday to receive 2 profit boosts for our same game and standard parlays, with the profit boost depending on the number of legs included. See the Bet Rivers app or website for full details. Let's move on to the next bowl game on the schedule, and we'll go to the 2 teams that participated last week in conference championship game weekend, and both come up on the short end, and that is Troy and Jacksonville State. Both teams are 8-5. Troy gave it all they could handle. I thought that James Madison would take care of business in a big way. Troy was much more competitive against the Dukes, and a lot of people figured and covered easily against James Madison. Jacksonville State lost it late at home. Kennesaw State put together a drive late to nip that one. So Troy here is the favorite, Paul, 4 and 46.5 currently at Bet Rivers.
Yeah, both these teams are from the state of Alabama, so you have that dimension. And these teams used to play one another when both were not in the FBS level. They haven't played since 2000, way back in 2001, however, when Troy ascended to the FBS level. So they used to play, way back when, but this is their first meeting in 24 years. So kind of a interesting dynamic there. This is Jacksonville State's 3rd year in the FBS and their 3rd straight bowl appearance. So they're 3 for 3 qualifying for the postseason. And, last year they were when Rich Rodriguez was still there, they were the surprise winner of Conference USA. Rich Rodriguez, however, in the offseason leaves for West Virginia, and a number of players are out the door as well. But they had another strong season. Advanced, as you pointed out, advanced to the Conference USA championship game once again. Lost to Kennesaw State there in Jacksonville, 19-15. So Jacksonville State having another good year. Both of these teams obviously lost in the conference championship game. Troy last season, 4-8, didn't have a good year, but they bounced back, have a good season, win their division in the Sun Belt. And like you, I really thought James Madison needing to perhaps score some style points, and the way that they're playing, how prolific that offense for James Madison is under the leadership of their quarterback, Alonzo Barnett Jr. I thought they might pour it on the Trojans, but that wasn't the case. I mean, this was a tight game. Troy only trailed 17-14 at halftime and at the end of the third quarter, so very competitive throughout, a closer game than most expected. I look at motivation here, and I kind of take the position, I wonder if Troy is going to be as motivated as Jacksonville State, because Troy, they might have thrown their best punch against James Madison. To me, that's a little bit more. Not only is it for the conference championship, but just the fact JMU is going to the playoff, nationally ranked team, those types of, issues. I think they might have used a little bit more of their collective team psyche, if you will, in that matchup. So again, I'm probably going to be on the sideline. I only made it 2.5. I say I'm going to probably be on the sideline. I might take a small position on Jacksonville State plus the points. But if I get involved, it will certainly be the Gamecocks or nothing in this bowl game.
All right, so the field of 12 is set for the college football playoff, and a lot of controversy there, but it's an interesting way to do things. But anyway, here we go. And I think that they are I look at 3 real players in this whole field. Now, Ohio State at plus 230 is the favorite to win it at Bet Rivers. Indiana is second choice, 250. Georgia third, 6-1. Oregon and Texas Tech fourth at 9-1. To me, there are 3 teams that can win it. And that's just Ohio State, Indiana, and Texas Tech. I'm in SEC country. Again, the conference was the overall highest rated conference in college football this year by the metrics, but they just lack a super team. The 5 participants: Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Georgia, and Texas A&M. There's not a super team in there. And I think the one thing that the transfer portal, and you would think that these teams with a lot of them have the bigger budgets for player personnel. NIL is what they call it. It's not necessarily endorsements that are paying the players. But anyway, they're cutting into their depth. And look, it's football. You're going to lose players. And man, so they got future NFL players on there too deep. That's not the case anymore. Those guys are leaving for immediate playing time and bouncing around. And a lot of time, therefore, on the second string on one roster, they're going to get a lot more money to be first string on another roster. So the 5 participating teams in the SEC, any of them could pull off a one-game upset, but a series of quality wins, I just don't see it. Ohio State, Indiana, and we thought that Indiana would have a little bit more motivation than Ohio State, maybe a little natural letdown. And that might have been the case. So I'm not going to overreact and say Indiana's much better, but we certainly respect the style of play at Indiana, the style of play at Ohio State, and what Texas Tech has as well is that defense and that line of scrimmage. And man, they are built to it. How about BYU coming out, delivering us for the first blow? They just brushed it off and came right back at them. And I don't know what the hell's going on in Texas, Paul Stone, but what do they have in the water? Whether it's a Houston's basketball team or Texas Tech's football team, these guys look 10, 15 years older than everybody. So, I mean, I love the way they play the game. And so I think all 3, I don't think that Texas Tech is ahead of Ohio State, Indiana, but damn it, plus 230, plus 250, or plus 900. give me the shot here with Texas Tech, and maybe because it's the upstart, maybe because they weren't this team last year, but those three are the three that can win it, in my opinion. I'm going to take the longest shot in the Red Raiders.
Yeah, you being a long-time SEC media member, Jimmy, I would think that you're probably on Kirby Smart's Christmas card list. But this
Yeah.
year, the Curbster might leave you off. He might tell Mrs. Smart, take Ott off the list. He's not including us as one of the teams that can win the national championship. I agree with you. I mean, Texas Tech, man, that they're just with Bayron Morton, who has been injury prone, throughout his career, and it's not a given he's going to make it through, the playoffs, even if they win a game or what have you. He has been really injury prone, but when he's healthy, these Red Raiders are something else. And, historically, back to the Mike Leach days and even prior to that, we've thought of the Red Raiders as an offensive juggernaut, a prolific team on that side of the ball, and not so much on defense. But that's not the case any longer. This team tackles. They play disciplined. They read their keys well. I mean, this is a good football team. You saw them 3 times, what I would say their 3 marquee games, traveling to Utah, playing BYU out there in Lubbock, and then playing BYU again last weekend for the Big 12 Conference Championship game there in Arlington. And I mean, those 3 performances, man, their A game was on display all 3 times. And like you, I like Texas Tech. I actually took 2 tickets back in October to win the national championship. I took Indiana at 8-1, took Texas Tech at 20-1. So I'm not going to trade you my ticket for this one, even though I love Bet Rivers' number there. But I like Texas Tech, and I think, again, this is a team that has a chance. I would add, again, I think Georgia, those 3 teams that you mentioned, I think are definitely teams that could win it. I think Georgia could win it. I think they're really playing well right now. And Miami, again, I know they're a little bit of a long shot, but if Carson Beck can avoid turnovers, they got a playmaker in Malachi Tony at wide receiver, the true freshman who was the high school quarterback. That guy's a game breaker. And I think Miami's a team that could kind of come from the outside and maybe catch a few guys down the stretch. But I like your Texas Tech play. I'd love to see the Red Raiders raise the trophy in Miami come mid-January.
All right, Paul, a couple of playoff matchups that you're looking at, and all the lines are posted at Bet Rivers for the first 4 games. Of course, these will be played on campus sites before the neutral site quarterfinals. And one thing about Georgia, too, they have improved. Okay, this is not the same team that should have lost in Knoxville. Kirby's words, should have lost. We had no business winning this game. Took some crazy officiating down at Jordan-Hare Stadium to win that one against Auburn. So they have improved, but I'm not going to overreact for whatever reason. Alabama's offensive line took the evening off in Atlanta, but still, they are improving. They are better, and there's no doubt. But this is just not several of those Alabama teams. The back-to-back champions that Georgia had, in those 2 national championship games against Alabama and TCU, 2019 LSU team. The 2 teams in 2011, nobody was close to LSU and Alabama when they played that rematch down in the Superdome for the national championship. These 5 teams are not in that class that they were back in the run where the national championship games just were not competitive between the SEC teams and the others. Let's go to a couple that you've kind of signaled out that you like, Paul. And so it's something about that team that gets in that is the questionable team, or maybe the last team to get in. Maybe it's in the NCAA basketball tournament or here that say, well, boy, they take advantage of their opportunity. And that's the Miami Hurricanes. And the odds, and some people posted odds, and boy, Notre Dame was as much as minus 30-1, minus 3,000 to make it to the college football playoff. It did not happen. Miami +4 at College Station against Texas A&M. You kind of think the Hurricanes are a real live dog here.
Yeah, no question, Jimmy. Texas A&M had an outstanding season, but I see the Aggies as being a little bit vulnerable in this first round matchup at Kyle Field against the Hurricanes. First of all, we'll start with the really good for Texas A&M. The Aggies went into South Bend in week 3 as a 6.5-point underdog, upset last season's national runner-up 41-40. That was a back and forth score fest. definitely that game, that victory by A&M over Notre Dame at Notre Dame Stadium, one of the better road data points that any team in college football, possessed this season. It was A&M's third victory of the season. They got off to 11-0 start. Their hopes of an undefeated regular season were squashed there in Austin when hated rival Texas pulled the mild upset 27-17 on Thanksgiving Friday. But I think it's fair to ask, did that loss to Texas perhaps somewhat expose or at least demonstrate Texas A&M's vulnerability against college football's best teams? Without question, for those of us who schedule like you and I and others who follow the sport closely, there's no question A&M, the Aggies, benefited from a friendly SEC schedule this season. In fact, the 7 teams that they beat in SEC play, those 7 teams finished a combined 12-44 in conference play. The 7 teams that they beat, the Aggies won games by 6 points or fewer against Auburn, Arkansas, and South Carolina. Those 3 teams, although really good, and they really show the balance of the SEC from top to bottom, but those 3 teams went 2-22 in SEC play. 2 of those tied affairs against those 3 teams I just mentioned were actually in College Station, so they were on their home turf. You look at Miami; they started strong. I had the win over Notre Dame, also defeated Florida and South Florida early in the year. Clearly, the Canes struggled in the midsection of their schedule, and I think they really played well down the stretch, those final 4 games, including that victory at Pittsburgh. I know I had Pittsburgh plus the points there against Miami, and the Canes just came in and took care of business in those sub-40-degree temperatures. And I mentioned earlier in this podcast, true freshman receiver Malachi Toney. This is a guy who has 84 catches on the year, 970 yards, 7 touchdowns. He is one of the best wide receivers, in my opinion, in college football as a true freshman as we enter the playoff. I think that guy could make a name for himself. I think kind of the wild card for Miami is going to be Carson Beck. He's shown the propensity for turnovers in some big games. If Beck can stay away from the turnovers, I think Miami is talented enough to defeat anyone. And I think they're going to take care of the Aggies in this first round game on December 20th. Give me the Canes plus 4 over the Aggies in College Station.
With that 4 to 5 and big time atmosphere like it will be at Kyle Field. They'll have 100,000 strong for this, and there won't be an empty seat in that stadium for this for their first college football playoff game. But I would put that at a 5-point difference. So the line tells you at 4. The odds makers think that they respect Miami. Nick Saban talked about Miami's roster. It tells you how good it is, and that's probably where it wasn't that. Miami wasn't more deserving of Notre Dame, just leading them on for every one of those television shows and posting them ahead of Miami. And that's when I thought they should have. Because what was Notre Dame? Notre Dame against a suspect schedule, but was dominant, looked so good. And one of their best wins, their best road win, was at Pitt. In Miami, in some tough conditions, some cold conditions, which that roster is not used to, they were just as dominant. That's probably the week where they should have brought in head to head as a deciding factor with such a close resume, and then the head to head being the difference. That's probably it would have saved you a little angst at that time. BYU, one spot. Why does it take you for them to be side by side for head to head to come into play? Yeah, this just in the selection process is just a tad flawed. All right, one more that you're looking at. Oh, the game in Oxford, Tulane. And John Summerall, he's on his way to the Florida Gators, but he coached this game, and he coached against the Morris, who is headed to Oklahoma State. Lane Kiffin will not be at this one. It's called the Tulane versus No Lane matchup. In this one, Ole Miss at Bet Rivers, 17 and a half point favorites over the Wave.
Yeah, Ole Miss actually opened as a 15-point favorite at some books on Sunday, so the Rebels have certainly taken money. You mentioned the coaching situation here. John Summerall off to Florida. He'll stay and coach Tulane until their season is completed. Lane Kiffin, on the other hand, as you mentioned, already has packed his bags for Baton Rouge. This game's going to be interesting. It's a rematch, first of all. These teams met earlier in the year. Ole Miss dominated that game, won 45-10. They outgained the Green Wave by almost a 2-1 margin, 548 total yards to 282. Trinidad Chambliss, he came up huge in that game, 307 yards passing against Tulane in the first meeting, 11.4 yards per attempt. He also rushed for 112 yards against the Green Wave, so he showed his dual threat capability. This Tulane pass defense is just not that good. Later in the year after playing Ole Miss, we'll all remember that it was either a Thursday night or a Friday night game when Tulane went to San Antonio, played Texas San Antonio. Owen McCowan, the Texas San Antonio quarterback, he hardly missed a pass in that game. I think he was 32 of 34. So 2 incompletions, 32 of 34 against Tulane, 391 yards, 11.5 yards per attempt. So it wasn't all dink and dunk. He was throwing some intermediate throws and even some vertical throws. And he played a great game. But Tulane, their pass efficiency defense ranked 85th by Phil Steele. So I think they're going to have another difficult time. They're not a great defense to begin with, and certainly facing an SEC style defense or offense, rather. I think they're going to give up a lot of points to the Rebels. Ole Miss has gotten some good news, got some last night on Monday, December 8th. ESPN reported, Pete Thamel specifically, I believe, reported that 4 assistants who will join Lane Kiffin at LSU returned to Oxford yesterday morning on Monday the 8th to coach the Rebels in their remaining games this season, that being their tight ends coach, Joe Cox, the wide receiver coach, George McDonald, assistant quarterback coach, Dane Stevens, and slot receivers coach, Sawyer Jordan. So that's good news. Charlie Weiss Jr. already, it had been announced, the offensive coordinator, that he would be calling plays there for Ole Miss. So I think they've got some continuity. I don't think it's going to impact them, the absence of Lane Kiffin, all that significantly, especially against an outmatched opponent, which I believe Tulane is in this situation. I think Ole Miss takes care of business. I think they roll. I like the Rebels minus 17.5 over the Green Wave.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 assistants taking come on back and coach, but no Lane. Tulane versus no Lane. In Oxford and Vaught Hemingway. So and keep in mind, Tulane Yeoman Stadium is not some massive stadium, roughly 20,000, low 20s or something like that, but it's way more appropriate. It's a better experience uptown New Orleans on campus to go to a game there instead of downtown at the Superdome where 2/3 of the seats are empty. It is. And the Benson Factor family and Yeoman, an alum, have been very good. It's a nice stadium, and they have been better at home. They beat a Big Ten team at home handily in Northwestern to start the season. They won their conference championship game as an underdog there. So they won, and they beat Duke, the ACC champion, at home. And won it fairly comfortably. And they got blown out in San Antonio, got blown out in Oxford. So it's not one of these imposing places, but they play better on their campus at Tulane. So on the road here will be interesting. Also keep an eye on Trinidad Chambliss. He'll go the Diego Pavia route. He's going to try and get an extra year of eligibility, go to court. The players versus the NCAA. If we can get a line on that at Bet Rivers, we would back the players in that one as well. But he would be a hot commodity. Is he going to stay or is he going to leave? We'll see about that one. Finally, one game that bowl game that I have an eye on, and that is up in Nashville at the Music City Bowl. And when you're high profile or a high resource, high expectation program like Tennessee, who was in the playoff last year, boy, they are disappointed too. And to be beaten home, the worst home loss of Josh Heupel's tenure up in Knoxville, 21 points to the Vanderbilt Commodores. They're not crazy about this season. It's not a great feeling about it. Illinois, we talked about them. A lot of expectations for them and Brett Bielema's crew. Everybody was back. It was like every assistant. It was like at least 3 years for just about every key player, every key assistant, the head coach, the whole bit. The continuity was really there. They went to Duke early and got that win, but they just came up short a little bit this year of expectations. But how many of those guys came back this year? we're doing the homework now, and there's a lot of uncertainty on which players are going to opt out for these bowl games or not. I got a feeling that Illinois is going to have a little bit more of participation than most teams. Plus 5.5, I'll take them straight up in this one. I think they're going to be more excited to play in this one. In Tennessee, when you're a high resource, high expectation program in the NFL, the SEC, the NFL light, Music City Bowl is a disappointment, to be quite frank. So give me the Fighting Illini and Brett Bielema's crew plus 5.5 in that one, Paul.
I echo almost everything you said there, Jimmy. So much, we talked about it earlier, so much uh, when you're handicapping bowl games should center around that motivation edge. And, one of the SEC does a great job of marketing its product without question. And one of my favorite slogans of the conference that's been around a long time is it just means more. And in this case, I think it means more to the Fighting Illini. I think for a Big Ten team to have the opportunity to defeat an SEC team, although they're the two conferences clearly at the top of college football's pecking order. The SEC does, surpass the Big Ten in most people's eyes. I think other than Big Ten, just big time fans of that conference, the SEC is considered by most the superior league. So when you get to these bowl games, it's almost like handicapping a different season because it's not so much about power rating as it is who's on the field, who's playing. And you kind of, address that you think Illinois will have closer to its full roster. And I agree with that sentiment. So it's about who's playing and who has the motivation edge. And I think Illinois from the Big Ten, they didn't play in the playoff last year, so they're not feeling the same thing that Tennessee is. This time last year, they were preparing to play in the playoff and go to Columbus, I believe, to play Ohio State. And now they're playing Illinois in the Music City Bowl, and I'm sure they'll put on the right colors and, say all the right things at the press conference,
Right.
so forth and so on. But I think Illinois plus the points is the right side. I'm going to join you here and take Brett Bielema and the Fighting Illini plus the points over the Volunteers.
Maybe in Birmingham for the offices, and maybe the girl on the Emerald Coast beaches down in Destin and Rosemary and others will say it just means more. But at the Odd House and these minor bowl games, it means a lot less for these high expectation SEC programs. Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here in the College Sports Rush YouTube channel. We'll do it all the way through the bowl games and through the college football playoff as well. You're brought to you by Bet Rivers. We'll see you then.